I'm gonna load up a rack that I made for Drums That Knock Volume 8. So I have a Drums That Knock Volume 8 rack. And there's tons of sounds in here because I loaded up some of my most used sounds from the kit. There's like 100 sounds in this drum rack. I'm gonna just make a quick drum pattern with this rack. So I'm just gonna take a kick. Let's get a hi-hat too. Something I do is I'll load up a quick drum rack with a key command in Shortcut Buddy. It'll pull up the whole drum rack. So I hit Shift 8 and it'll load up Drums That Knock Volume 8. A couple things. I might want to duplicate this and add more sounds in another track. If I do that, it duplicates the entire rack with all those samples in it. So it's using up tons of RAM and CPU because now I have 2 drum racks with 100 sounds in it. One thing I do now, and this is a trick to getting your individual sounds out of the drum rack and into multiple tracks. What I used to do is copy the track, duplicate it, and then like on this one, I'd delete the hi-hat and the snare and leave the kick, and on this one, I'd delete the kick and the hi-hat and leave the snare. But you don't have to do all that. In order to track out whatever's in your drum rack, even if there's tons of sounds in it, here's what you do. In this case, find our kick. It's right here. I'm gonna just drag it down into this open area. And then what it does is it takes the kick out of that drum rack and makes a new MIDI track with the drum rack with the kick in it. Then I'm gonna take the snare. Do the same thing, drag it below the kick. Now I have another drum rack with just the snare in it. Now I'm gonna do the same thing with the regular hi-hat. Drag it down. And then the last sound, the open hi-hat. Now, the reason why I dragged all of them down is because now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 tracks with each one sound on it. And then I have my original with all the other sounds. So now I can add more sounds to it. One at a time. I like that. Okay, now I have 2 more sounds. So now, let's go back into the drum rack. Let's take that, drag it down. What sound is this? That's that, just drag it down. Boom. Now my whole thing is tracked out. And I have a drum rack with all the sounds I haven't used yet. And I can just keep going. So that way you're not duplicating the whole drum rack with all the sounds and using tons of CPU. So you have these sounds in the drum rack, but you also have a simpler. If you want just the simpler so you can play it across the MIDI keyboard, hit Command-Shift-G on a Mac. You ungroup it. So then it goes from the drum rack, when you dragged it out of the drum rack, to just the simpler. So now you can play it across the MIDI keyboard.